normal voice telephone is a technology that doesn't really have to be paid. It is, of course, normally part of a huge worldwide network of stations, data centers, wiring, substations, etc. that, of course, is controlled by mega corporations that are charging, that have it set up so you have to pay, have it locked up, secured, and watchdogged so that you have to pay to access their network, make calls, etc. But you can install a phone in your room, office, and install another phone in your mama's house, in anybody else's house. You can run a pair of wires between the two phones and effectively have a telephone communication service between the two. You effectively, if you do that, have your own private telephone network. Yes, it's a very simple, a two-phone network, but it is, in fact, a network. You can do that with a computer as well. You can communicate from computer to computer free of charge by making some basic connections, using some basic equipment, and voila, you have a computer-to-computer internet or network, network. So that's just to give you an idea that yes, you can communicate off the grid. It is not something that is unthinkable and a pipe dream. It does take knowledge, it does take development, it does take time and resources, it does take some tinkering with, trial and error, it does take equipment. That equipment may cost money. You may be able to find it free though. So this is just to let you know that we have options off the grid. However, the most popular option and probably the easier options to choose are your wireless options. They are going to require a lot less work. They are widely available. And these are your radio frequency or RF options or technologies. There are many. The most popular, I believe, right now is your ham radio equipment and technologies, amateur radio, VHF or very high frequency radio, or sometimes it's called FM, amateur radio, since it's mostly transmitted, or that particular type is exclusively transmitted over FM or modulated frequency. And you have a lot of options with that. You have to, of course, acquire the equipment. The equipment may or may not be readily affordable. Some of the higher end, higher quality equipments, more advanced equipment, of course, is going to cost you more. But they do have some other equipment that is not as fancy, not as durable or quality, that could be acquired and that is quite affordable. That could get you started in the world of ham radio. There is a requirement for ham radio in this country, in the US, to have a license to operate. The license is quite simple to get, I believe. It requires nothing but an application and knowledge, a bit of knowledge. You have to study maybe for a week or so and take a test that basically covers etiquette, covers safety, covers what you should and should not do when using the ham radio frequency. It teaches you about frequencies, what they are, which frequency you are able to use. They have different types of licenses, different levels. So you're limited to a certain frequency depending on the level of license that you acquire. Of course, the lower level is going to have the most limited spectrum in the radio frequency, what they call band. So the more privilege, they call it privileges that you get, are basically they require a higher license level for ham radio. And after you get your license, after you get your equipment, you can or you may or may not join a club. There's advantages of joining a club, radio club, where you can, gain knowledge, perhaps gain opportunities to gain the equipment, some guidance on how to use and deploy, install, and use the equipment. After you do all that, you can freely communicate with other radio operators that can also operate on the ham bands. And voila, there you go, free communication. When I say free, of course, there are resource requirements like everything else. There's really nothing that is completely free, but it's free of payments, free of money required that you have to dish out every month to a company, like your cell phone company or your phone company or your internet service provider, etc. So another option, without going into much detail on radio, I mean, that would take some time as well to describe everything about ham radio. So jumping over to the next most popular that I believe is for radio options is the CB radio, or Citizens Band radio. This is nothing but a frequency that is used. It is reserved for use for citizens here in the US, called the Citizens Band. This band has the advantage of being completely free of having to be licensed, and having to pay for it, of course, is free of charge to use. All you have to do is get the equipment. The equipment is more or less affordable, even much more affordable than your ham or amateur radio equipment, and you can freely use that. The equipment is limited to a low voltage, so it is completely safe to use as long as the equipment has not been tampered with. It is completely safe for use for most people, and you can use it to communicate to surprisingly long distances. You can communicate across your town, you can communicate even across state lines and even across nations. Again, through the air, completely wirelessly and free of charge. There is a lot of traffic on the CB radio bands since it's free. So also with that comes a little bit of unreliability as far as establishing communication with a certain location or, caller or radio operator. But it is definitely reliable enough, secure enough, and it is free. It is off the grid as well. You require no connection to any one network, any payments, any commitments. You require no infrastructure. It is completely the air. And just to go back to the ham radios, as far as range, the range is a bit more limited than CB. The ham radio frequency or radio communications are a bit more limited when it comes to radio, which is called simplex communications. That is having no antennas in between. Your communication range is limited by many factors, which I'm not going to really get into, but just to give an example, it is limited by objects, trees, even the curvature of the earth, because the communication waves travel in more or less a straight line. So you have to basically be within what they call line of sight of the radio or operator that you're trying to reach. Of course, there are many factors in between there, so the range could improve, even be more than the line of sight communications if you take into consideration other factors. But this could be basically canceled. This limitation could be canceled by the use of antenna repeaters, what they call repeaters. And these are nothing but antennas and equipment set up on antennas that repeats your transmission and basically relay it to the other radio receiver or operator. So you basically can extend your range by many miles, sometimes hundreds of miles, by using repeaters that are in relatively high positions, relatively high terrain. There are other ways to extend VHF or ham or amateur communications, which I'm not going to get into right now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please look for the next episode soon, and please ensure to share this with your friends and family. And please like this content and subscribe as a sign of support and for me to continue to provide this type of content to more people like you. Lastly, if you wish to support this content further, please visit the links provided in this publication. Thank you.